Hello and welcome to yet another edition of 21 Minutes with KKB. My name is Kwabena Chenchehenibuati. Today I'm having a diplomat as my guest, and he's a man who has been a diplomat for several years, for many years, and he perhaps knows Africa more than a lot of us who are even Africans do about the continent itself. So I return shortly to introduce my guests for today. Stay with us. Many thanks for joining us, and my guest for today is the gentleman who represents the United States of America here in Ghana, Ambassador Robert Jackson. Ambassador, many thanks for having us today on, and it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. It's good to see you. I was reading a bit about your profile. God, you seem to have traveled a lot in Africa. You seem to have done a lot here on the continent. How many years?
So I first came to Africa in 1985 to Burundi, and Ghana is the seventh African country.
Seventh African country.
But I've traveled to a total of 33 of the 54. So I feel that I know Africa quite well.
I think you know Africa better than I do. So what is it that you see as you travel along these African countries? And of course, you've been here for about 3 years or so. What is it that you notice about the Ghanaian people in comparison to all these countries that you've been to?
The Ghanaian people and Ghana are quite exceptional. Whenever I have traveled here for tourism and as I've traveled around the country, I've always found people particularly hospitable.
It can all be good, obviously. You've said a lot of good things about Ghana and the continent as a whole, but I'm sure you may have come across some negatives, of course, about probably the country, the people. There have been issues about corruption and the like. Perhaps maybe you could just touch on maybe one or two things that personally you see as a negative.
Well, I think continent-wide corruption remains a major challenge.
How about here in Ghana?
In Ghana as well. There's definitely been progress with the creation of an Office of the Special Prosecutor, the appointment of Mr. Amidou, but we need to now see him actually prosecute people. I personally have been very troubled that no one has been prosecuted for the Tema Central Medical Stores fire, because we saw almost $80 million worth of commodities go up in flames. We know who the culprits were. Those people should be on trial by now.
They say the wheels of justice going slowly. Perhaps aren't you just rushing the system?
I don't think 3 years is rushing the system.
Really?
Really. I think that, yes, cases have to be prepared well. But my understanding is that the investigations into the arson, which apparently caused the fire, were pretty exhaustive. And so based on that information, I would think it would be possible to develop a case. Okay,
so I'm going to ask you two things related to what you just mentioned, about the progress you are making in the fight against corruption. And with that in particular, not many in Ghana seem to believe so. Of course, with the recent Corruption Perception Index report suggesting that quite a number of people still think corruption is rife. Actually, it's higher than it was about a year ago and 2 years ago.
The fact that people perceive corruption as being worse, I think is an indication that there haven't been prosecutions. To my mind, the fact that the only real accomplishments that we can look to in the corruption area are the crackdown on galamsey, on illegal mining, and the creation of the special prosecutor. So let's see action. I think when we see people being prosecuted, in fairness, the SNIT prosecution also happened. I shouldn't neglect that. But in general, I think Ghanaians are hungry to see action being taken on corruption.
There was a tweet by I think it's the Australian ambassador, about deaths in the country, how sanitation is a problem, and he had to actually take a photo and tweet it. And it was only until then that action was done, and then we saw the filth being cleared just about 24 hours later. Is that something you've also seen? Do you think it's an attitudinal problem with Ghanaians?
I think that Ghanaians need to pay a lot more attention to sanitation. It's a well-known fact that open defecation is a huge problem here, that the waterways are clogged with plastic, the beaches are not generally very clean, and these are resources that Ghanaians need.
Are we a country of dirty people? Would you go as far as saying that?
It's not about people being dirty or clean, it's about good habits. And I would say the way waste and open defecation are tolerated here, there needs to be more education so that people understand the implications of what they're doing.
I want to know how you cope with this, because there's a perception about the U.S. president, particularly among a lot of Africans. They think he's quite hostile. Some describe him as a racist and the like. You are here. You are having to deal with the people as and when they come in. How difficult is it?
So I managed it by focusing on all of the positive things that the United States is doing in health, in education, in agriculture, in our cultural exchanges, in the security field. And President Akufo-Addo tweeted a reaction to President Trump's remarks, but he did not ask me to come to Flagstaff House, and I believe that that's because he knows that's not how I feel. So he conveyed his message, and the message was received, and we continue to focus on the very strong and very positive relationships between our two
So the
countries.
president never summoned you to the Flagstaff House?
No.
Contrary to reports. Have
Contrary
you
to
spoken to him afterwards?
I have.
Okay, and did he share any thoughts on this?
I'm not going to discuss my exchanges with the president.
Okay. I mean, that's fine. But speaking of this, I mean, of course, you will take us to Ghana-US trade relations and the fact that our president is very keen on a country beyond aid, saying that we do not really need aid. If we do need any form of aid, it should be trade. So how do you think we are, for instance, tapping into that? I know there's AGOA and a few other things you could tap into, but do you think Ghana as a country is making enough of this, and are we even likely to really get to the point where we can say, yeah, a country beyond aid?
I think Ghana will definitely get beyond aid, and I think it will happen sooner rather than later. President Akufo-Addo's vision of one district, one factory may not be realized during his first term, or even his second term if there is one. But the idea is exactly what's needed to get beyond aid.
But is that not what successive governments in the country have been doing all along? Is it that Akufo-Addo just came and everything just changed all of a sudden?
I don't think it's about Akufo-Addo coming and having changed everything all of a sudden. I do think that he is more visionary than some recent Ghanaian leaders. But
Is that to talk about John Mahama?
let's just say, I think President Mahama had a vision too. So I want to give President Mahama credit where credit is due. His emphasis was on infrastructure, which is very important. Schools, clinics, hospitals, roads. President Mahama did a lot for this country.
Would you say the former president, as John Mahama, laid the foundation for Akufo-Addo to move at this pace?
I would say that President Akufo-Addo's focus on the private sector and making the private sector the engine of growth rather than government being the driving force is how I see the difference between the two of them. Both of them had visions for the country. I think President Akufo-Addo's vision of private sector-led growth is likely to create more jobs and propel the economy forward faster than the infrastructure investments. But the infrastructure investments were important.
Now, I want us to quickly touch on the security situation in the country. In the past few months, I should say, there have been quite a number of security concerns. Today, for instance, you're told there's a high-profile meeting of security couples with the president. Your citizens in the country, do they feel safe?
They do feel safe. Ghana is considered a level 1 threat for for crime and for security broadly on the scale of 4.
Okay.
So it's at the minimum level. I feel very safe here. But I think Ghanaians have the right to be concerned about recent spectacular robberies, shootings, and the police need more people. They also need more resources. The president promised in his State of the Nation address to provide those resources, and it's going to take a little time to sort that out.
The issue of the 2 ex-Guantanamo Bay detainees that were that were brought to the country, and of course it came with its own issues. Ghanaians were not very happy about it. Well, they say we didn't know much about it, we didn't hear anything about it, we just woke up one day and they were here.
I was not aware that the Ghanaians had granted refugee status to the 2 ex-detainees until the foreign minister made the announcement.
The United States was not consulted at all. Is that the case?
We were consulted, but I had not been informed that the actual decision had been made. That's an accurate statement. But let's go back to the issue. So, because Ghana and the United States are good friends, Ghana was one of 59 countries that we asked to accept detainees from Guantanamo who had been through a very rigorous vetting process. One of the complaints that Ghanaians raised, or one of the concerns that Ghanaians raised, was that having these 2 people here might be a security risk. More than 2 years after their arrival, I think we can all say that they have not been a security risk. No one's aware of what they're doing, which is the way it should be. They have settled into Ghanaian society, they are married, they have children, and they have been integrating themselves into life in Ghana. If they go to another country, that is now an issue between the government of Ghana, the government of another country, and the 2 refugees themselves.
The problem a lot of people have is, how do we just oppose nobility with putting your citizens at risk?
But 2 years later, I think we can say that we didn't put the
Well,
citizens
probably it's
at
because
risk.
you do not see them. So if they are even perpetrating crimes, how do we know the other ones?
So they are under regular surveillance. They are not perpetrating
Who monitors
crimes.
them?
The security services of Ghana
The Ghana Police Service, for instance,
and others.
and others. And these are the same people who have not been able to protect the citizenry because, of course, the crime rate is so high.
Maybe
Yet
they're
still
spending too much time watching these when they don't need to be watched. I don't think that's the issue.
Right.
But my point is, no, we are very confident that they have not been a security threat, that they have not been committing crimes, and they've been under surveillance to make certain that there's no threat to the people of Ghana.
I'm interested in the eligibility criteria. So how does someone who is deemed to be extremely violent and a threat to the United States, some way, somehow, qualify to be repatriated, to be sent to a different country?
So let's take the 2 ex-detainees who are here. My understanding is that they were recruited by Al-Qaeda in early 2001. They were recruited in Saudi Arabia. They went to Afghanistan. When the United States invaded Afghanistan to drive Al-Qaeda out in the fall of 2001, both of them were captured. So they had been foot soldiers with Al-Qaeda for a few months, and they then spent the next 14 years in prison.
That's Guantanamo Bay.
In Guantanamo
Because you
Bay.
saw them to be a threat.
We put them in prison because they had been captured on the battlefield fighting for Al-Qaeda.
But they could have been in other prisons, not necessarily Guantanamo Bay.
Correct. But they were never tried, and beginning in the Bush administration, we started analyzing the backgrounds and the behavior of these detainees.
But why ask other countries to accept them when you have such vast land?
Because our Congress passed a law forbidding their entering the United States.
So in the wisdom of Congress, they are not fit to be in the United States. Why then do
Correct.
we move them elsewhere? Why then do you bring them to Ghana?
We brought them to 59 countries.
Including Ghana.
Including Ghana, because those governments indicated a willingness to resettle them.
The legalization of homosexuality and the like. I'm sure you may have heard about some of the debates, the things that we usually talk about on our various radio stations and TV stations and the like, and how some persons who may be gays or bisexuals or homosexuals are not really treated in the most friendly of terms here in Ghana. Is that a concern for the USA?
It is a concern. I believe that everyone should enjoy the same human rights. And personally, I believe that people are either born heterosexual or homosexual. It's not a lifestyle choice.
So you think some people are naturally born gay?
Yes, I do. Statistics indicate that probably 10% of people are born gay. I think there are far more gays in Ghana than Ghanaians realize.
Oh, really?
Yes. But because of societal attitudes, they keep their sexuality very private. But the United States is not asking anyone to change their religious beliefs or to legalize homosexuality. We're asking that all people be treated the same, that they have the same human rights and the same right to privacy.
Some think it's just myopic for anyone to think that because someone doesn't necessarily have the same sexual orientation as him or her, that person should be deprived of certain rights. Is that something you believe in? That is myopic in thinking?
I do think it's myopic. I think it reflects a lack of understanding of the science.
And that goes to a significant majority of Ghanaians.
Yes, and I think that many of those Ghanaians, if they studied the issue, might come to a different conclusion.
I know you have a very rigorous system. You do not just allow anybody to enter the United States, of course, and that's understandable. But reactions on social media, sometimes when you go there and you're reading some of the things, it appears a huge chunk of people who turn up here to apply for visas, some for genuine reason, of course. There are a lot of people who may try to sabotage the system, find a way to enter the States for their own personal gains. But some with genuine reason wanting to go to the States, perhaps for a conference, for a program, end up being denied. And then they leave, they have to come back, come pay more money. They leave, they are bounced again, they need to go, come back. And why is that the case?
So there are two reasons.
Okay.
But let's look at them individually. First of all, I want Ghanaians to know that each year, approximately 16,000 Ghanaians are issued visas for travel to the United States for business, education, and tourism. The reason that there is a high bar for showing strong ties to Ghana is because Ghanaians constitute the 5th largest number of people who have overstayed their visas in the United States, up there with India, China, the Philippines, Russia, which have much larger populations than Ghana does. There are more Ghanaians who are in deportation proceedings right now than people from Mexico or people from Nigeria, which also have larger populations than Ghana. So because almost 7,000 of your countrymen have overstayed their visas or committed crimes in the United States and are subject to, are in some stage of the deportation process, it makes it harder for other Ghanaians to get visas. So they have to show that they have strong ties to Ghana. That is the US law, that they show that they have strong ties to Ghana. People who are young and single in particular have a hard time demonstrating that they have strong ties to Ghana. Older people.
So if I came to you today for a visa, it would be more difficult for me to get a visa as compared to someone who's married with children? Is that not discriminatory?
No, because your professional qualifications are well known. So we look at everything about the person. But poorer, less educated Ghanaians who are single and young are more likely to overstay their visas. That's just a fact. We ask Ghanaians to pay a processing fee.
How much is that?
It's approximately 110 US dollars.
Okay.
Approximately. I don't have the exact figure in my head, but that pays for our costs for security, for name checks, for police checks, for all of the things that are done before we issue someone a visa, and for the time that the officers spend interviewing people. So whether you receive the visa or not, you have gone through the whole process, and that's what
So it's more or less compensation for your work.
Yes. It's by law, it's designed to cover our costs.
Ambassador, many thanks for your time today. I'm sure you've managed to educate quite a number of people on this platform today. But just before you go, you've been here for what, 3 years?
I've been here for 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Yes.
This will be your 3rd year, right? This will be your 3rd year. Anything interesting caught your eye yet? Tourism?
So many
food?
things. So I've now visited every region in Ghana.
Every region?
Every region. In January, I made it to Upper East and Upper West, which were the only 2 regions that I had not visited. I visited some multiple times and will continue to. I think I've made 4 trips to the northern region, for example. And there are so many things about Ghana that have caught my eye, positive things. I like the food.
Which
it's a
which is your favorite?
Fact that guinea fowl is one of my favorite foods, and guinea fowl eggs are extraordinary. And yes, I've tried banku and fufu and the traditional dishes. And I enjoy high life music. I've enjoyed my time here. I continue to enjoy my time here. Ghana was a place I wanted to come. I had first visited here in 1999 when I was living next door in Cote d'Ivoire. I've been back several times since, and when President Obama asked me to be his ambassador here, I jumped at the opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. I'm sure we'll probably meet somewhere at a local joint where we are eating some fufu. You may just have to take a look at the banku dough. I'm sure Zainab has some answers too for you on that. But Ambassador Robert Porter Jackson has been our guest on 21 Minutes with KKB. I believe he has responded to a number of issues you had as far as the DV visa lottery was concerned, and also quite a number of other issues, you know, about Guantanamo Bay and the like, quite a number of things. Very insightful conversation we've had with His Excellency Robert Porter Jackson. My name is Kwabena Chenchen. Hopefully, I'll see you soon with another guest you are expecting.